Hi students, we'll be covering the last part of networking, which requires you to understand more on the network security concepts, and we'll be talking about a lot of them in the final video of networking section of class 12th curriculum. So let's talk about network security concepts and the threats and the preventions from these terms that we are very much aware of. When we are on the network, we actually face a lot of problem in terms of these terms called as viruses and worms and all, but we may not be very much sure of what these terms are. First of all, you should know what a virus rather is. A virus also has a full form which stands for Vital Information Resource Under Siege, which means whatever your important information which you have on the computer is under threat when there is a virus in your system. So it's nothing but a malicious program which is in your system, which tries to know information which is stored in your machine without your knowledge, and it tries to steal the sensitive data and the information. So it can come through the emails, it can come through the text messages or the attachments. It's very easily available. If you try to go to a particular site which you're not sure of, it can always attach itself with the certain untrusted links also. So one has to be very careful about certain files which you are not very sure of, because you should always remember there is nothing free on the internet, which generally we assume that there are sites like torrents and all which are absolutely free and we can download everything, but nothing is free on the internet. So what is a sign? How do you know whether you have a virus on your machine? Your system will start rebooting again and again, or it takes a lot of time to boot, or maybe your system is showing you a very weird kind of result. Suddenly a file will going to pop up, or it will going to close, or it will not even ask you. You'll see that suddenly your hard disk is it's eaten up, or your bandwidth is eaten up. So some of the types of viruses are the boot sector virus, the web scripting virus, and the resident. These are very common. Now worm is something which you can relate with the biological term called as worm. They are also the uh, malware programs which replicate, they repeat themselves, they repeat it to the extent that they start consuming the bandwidth, and suddenly you feel that what has happened to my hard disk, because you feel that I haven't had a lot of programs in my machine, but suddenly a lot of, because of the self replication of the information or the data, the a lot of system space has been eaten up because of this. Even network space is eaten up with this. So they enter the computer through the network, they duplicate themselves or replicate themselves, they keep making multiple copies of itself, and then they spread across the network. A worm is also spread through the emails. So it's also spread through the FTP servers. The very common worms and rather famous worms also were there. The first one was I'm just telling you few examples. So I Love You, which was there in 2000, and then we had a code blast also. It actually affected the Microsoft servers in 2001, and MS Blast also, that it actually affected in 2003. So MS Blast actually infected 25 million computers, and it was one of the most damaging softwares, that, or worms, that I shall say. Now apart from that, we also have a very commonly used term called as a Trojan horse, which is also a malware, which is basically used by those or created by those who try to peep in into the information of your very sensitive data, like your login credentials, so that they have, with the intention to steal, they can steal not only your data but your money also. So a Trojan horse or Trojan, it looks legitimate, but can take a complete control of your computer system. Some of the common Trojans are the Game Thief and Info Stealer Trojan also. So what exactly you're supposed to do to protect your system from these malware is basically to keep, first of all, updating your system. Secondly, it is very important that when you're doing an online often transaction and you are accessing your bank details and all, first of all, not to share your information on any online platform. Next is you should be very careful in terms of changing your passwords very frequently, and please keep very strong passwords, which is a combination of numbers, special characters, and the other alphabets also. And do not install the softwares which you think are very freely available until and unless they are properly authenticated from the site, and they are the open source software, so they get easily, get attached with the free things which are available on the net, and you will land up into a situation where you'll find that suddenly my data is lost or my sensitive information is lost. Now, spam is something which you must have seen very commonly. They are in your emails, in the form of your emails, when you start getting those bulk messages which you suddenly feel that from where have I received those messages. So these are those unwanted communication that you receive, and these are the messages which can be basically sent to you through an or for an or in the form of an advertisement, or just to sort of you can say sharing some kind of, say, company details, or doing some kind of publicity about a particular thing, uh, and the information is actually sent through the mail. So it is usually sent in the form of bulk mails, as I just specifically mentioned. So those spams are not very dangerous, but still, they since they keep occupying a lot of space in your mailboxes, so you have to be very careful in terms of keep on regularly deleting it. And very important thing is, when you get a mail from the unknown source, please never ever try to open that. Now, we have been using certain terms like cookies. Now, cookies on the networking is basically those small text files which are automatically created every time you're trying to visit a particular site, maybe for the very first time. Now, why do they do this? They are actually first of all, you should remember that the cookies are browser specific. So suppose you're trying to log in to google.co.in using a Chrome browser, then browser will going to create its own cookie, so that your internet experience becomes very fast, and you, because it keeps on making a log file for you to know that the person who is trying to access the information has certain areas where you do the search. So that is why you sometimes wonder that how come the system knows what I am actually looking for, because it creates that file and it stores that text file. But you have to remember that from time to time, so that a lot of space is not eaten up, you have to clear the cookies, because some of the cookies, though they're not very dangerous, they are stored in your system, and they actually just keep track of your visits and your activities on a particular website. But yes, certain threat can always be there, because ultimately that data is stored in the form of a text file which contains your credentials, sensitive credentials, so one has to be a little careful with that. So they are safe, though they do not transfer the virus or the malware to your system. And one of the as I just said, one of the examples is your, when you go to your login, so like a Google site or a Hotmail, where you're giving your login credentials, or you're going to yahoo.com. So, or apart from that, of course, if you're going to Amazon for shopping and also, you will know that it suddenly knows what you're actually looking for. So it shows you some details or some products based on your previous search. So from where does it actually come to know about your previous search? From the cookies also. So you can also now from time to time, you're supposed to remember that you should keep on clearing your cache and your cookies by going to the settings of your browser, and it's very important that you should never go and visit the unknown websites. Now, how do you protect your system? uh, even if you're having cookies, so because you must have seen that there are a lot of sites which do not let you move further till its specific cookies are attached. So or it actually asks you for the permission of the cookies, but you have to remember and that you should always be going to a proper well authorized website. Otherwise they can always track your information. Now how can you protect your system, because we are all vulnerable to the the threats which are there online. So we have to make sure that the firewall is always on, and it protects your system from attackers by um, because there are certain guidelines which are written in the firewall, and it whenever there is some kind of electronic communication happening on your machine, it actually checks and it only passes it to your system once those guidelines are matched or those rules are matched. So if the data doesn't match the rule, it will not allow it to pass, and it will going to block. So sometimes you must have seen that when you're trying to go to a particular site and you're trying to load something, it says a firewall has blocked it because it's not matching the credentials of a particular site. So you have to unblock or do something accordingly. So they filter, and when you have a proper antivirus also along with the firewall, it can provide a very very good security to your machine. Now there's another term called as HTTPS. Now you must have seen there are two actual terms. One is called as Hypertext Transfer Protocol, that is HTTP, and the other one is HTTPS. S stands for the term secure. Actually what happens is when you try to um, ask for an information on the internet, that information if it is sent to you using a hypertext transfer protocol, because all the information in the form of images and the text and the videos and all, they are sent through the hypertext transfer protocol. But when they are sent only to through HTTP, they are again prone to the virus, because the data is not encrypted, the data is not secured. But when we talk about the secure term along with the hypertext transfer protocol, the data is encrypted. For example, when I'm communicating and I'm transferring my data on the computer to you people, then in that case that information is passed as it is. It the information is uh, with HTTP, it is not converted into a coded language, but with HTTPS, the data or the information is converted into a coded language, so that some third party who is trying to know about what data I am actually transmitting will not be able to convert it. So it's more secure. So always uh, follow certain guidelines. So you must have seen that when you're trying to go to any banking site, all the banking sites are no more HTTP, they are HTTPS. Okay, now because we are again vulnerable to the threats and the virus, so therefore there is the Information Technology Act 2000 that was launched in India by, and it was signed by the President of India, Mr. K.R. Narayanan, in the year 2000, where the objective was that the trustworthy transaction or electronic communication should be there, and that could help us to reduce even the cyber crimes. So it's a very very detailed act, but I'll just going to quickly tell you that certain important parameters are looked into the Indian IT Act, which include data privacy, hacking, altering or stealing the sensitive information and the data of a person or on the network with some kind of wrong intention. Plagiarism is there, and that means using someone else's work with your name, or doing some kind of sending some obscene information that you're not supposed to send. So there is a punishment according to this act depending upon the section of the offense. So IT Act one thing but that we need to remember is that the IT Act 2000 is applicable only to the companies which are doing business in India and which have their servers in India. Okay, so if we are not having, if there are certain things or the companies which are not having the business in India, but people of India are, just using it, using the particular site, then it will not be applicable. Then we have something called as a cyber law. Again, the communities, the everything that is happening on the cyber world is, again, they're covered under the cyber law, because there are so many things which happen in the cyber law, um, where it's not just a cyber crime which is a part of the cyber law. Apart from that, there are a lot of other issues. Say, for example, if you're doing purchasing from Amazon.com, and you're doing purchasing from Amazon.co.in, so there is a difference. Say you are staying in India and you would like to send something to US, to one of your relatives. So what will you going to do? In that case, you will be going to .com site and you will be purchasing the stuff, and you will be sending, though you are sending it from India, the prices will be different, and vice versa. If that person is staying in US and is trying to send you some kind of product to India, the prices will be different. So there is something called as e-taxation which also happens, and it gets covered into the cyber law. Similarly, we have e-governance also, which gets covered into the cyber law, which says that, when the government agencies can also use the information and the technology for whatever their own purposes. And cyber crime, of course, is also a part of cyber law. So when you do, because a lot of times nowadays an online transaction is actually happening in terms of the online thing, so therefore all these things are actually covered in cyber law. So like any law, cyber law is also created to help protect the people and the organization on the internet from the malicious people on the internet, and help them to maintain the order. If someone breaks a cyber law or a rule, it allows another person or organization to take action against that person, or to have a sentence to a punishment. So everybody who's doing using the online services will be covered under the cyber law. Now, what are the common cyber crimes which are there? Of course, if somebody is trying to bully you, that's a cyber crime. Somebody is trying to steal your data, it is a cyber crime. Somebody is trying to use your personal information and use it saying that it's my information, that is plagiarism, that's a cyber crime. So a cyber crime is actually a criminal activity that either targets a user or the computer or the entire network. Okay, and it's either carried out by an individual or an organization. Some of the cyber crimes are the email frauds, the identity fraud, which is called as the identity theft also. Somebody is trying to bully somebody on the online case, that is your cyber bullying, which we have seen a lot with the youngsters, which they're doing it as a fun element, but they're not realizing the actual consequences of that. Then we have cyber extortion also, where somebody is trying to steal the data and then trying to threaten, saying that all your files will be sort of disclosed to the wrong people and all. And then you also have cryptojacking also, where the hackers, they break into the device and they use it as theirs. And at the same time, I mean, a lot of other things are under the cyber crime. So in case you come across any of such cyber crime where you think that a site can create some kind of problem for the users, then in India you can report the issues related to the cybercrime on the website https://cybercrime.gov.in. And as good citizens, that becomes definitely our moral responsibility also. Okay, now we have something called as IPR issue. IPR is intellectual property right. Now, if I am a creative person and I write poems, similarly, if I write books, then that's my content which I will be using. Similarly, if I'm drawing something, that's my content. Similarly, the same thing when actually happens on the online platform, that thing, to make it mine so that nobody else is able to use, I have to use a copyright or a patent or a trademark. Now if you see that at the back of the presentation, if I'll just show you back, see, can you see there is a hologram of CS Bhasha that I've used? I've just, though I'm not registered, but then I've used it. Why? So that nobody is able to copy my content. So that's what is basically, but when you do it in a legal way in terms of a patent and a copyright and a trademark, that's basically your intellectual property right. So you must have seen that every big company has its associated logo along with that. So it has to be registered by the concerned authorities also. But then what is a major issue when we talk about IPR on the online platform? The actual issue is that it's not very easy to enforce. Why? Because you can copy the content from one place to another place in a very, very easy way, and they are, so that means they are susceptible to the privacy on the internet. It's easy to copy the digital work, and it's difficult to monitor all the cases where the intellectual property rights are not adhered to on the internet. Hacking, now this hacking word is we have been using the moment this term called hacking is there, we always assume that it has to some it's always has to do something with a negative term. I mean it's not a negative term always. Hacking is of different types. Hacking is basically trying to know the flaws in the system, but with different intention. So when it comes with a different intention, then the purpose changes. Say for example, a hacker is actually a programmer who has a very good knowledge of the computer, but based on the intention, the hackers are of different types. So one is called as the ethical hacker or a white hat hacker, where which are actually hired by very, very big companies, so that they know what could be the possible flaw in their machine, so that that flaw can be rectified in case there is a cyber attack. Similarly, we have a cracker, which is a black hat, and that is a person or a programmer who tries to steal the sensitive data or the information without a proper authorization, and has a wrong intention. So that person with the wrong intention to steal the data is called as a cracker, and a black hat hacker is what you can say. And there's one term which is in between the two, that's called as a gray hat hacker. A gray hat hacker is someone who is trying to know the sensitive information without actually taking the consent of the company whose server details that person is taking, and can, I'm not saying always, can share that sensitive data for money to the others. So it's always susceptible also to steal and to further share that information. So that's a gray hat hacker. Now, what are the different web services which are available? These are very common terms that we all know. www is called as World Wide Web. A lot of people, they try to use this term with internet. Now internet is different. Internet is the hardware terminology where it's an interconnection of computers, but when we say World Wide Web, it is the collection of the online data that we view on the internet. Okay, so the computers, when they are connected so that the data can be shared, is called as internet, but the online collection of online documents on this platform is called as World Wide Web, which uses hypertext transfer protocol and can share data or websites in the form of picture, which includes pictures and sounds and all. Okay, so it's a network of servers over the internet is World Wide Web. Hypertext markup language is actually a text formatting language, because it's a language which was initially used to prepare nice looking web pages, and it helps a user to take one part of the page to another. If you know that you're allowed to link, when you go to a particular website, you're allowed to link one part of the page to another. That is why the term hypertext has come. So hypertext, why markup? Because the language is in the form of the angular brackets, which has some specific syntax. Therefore it's called as a hypertext markup language, which is where the tags are enclosed between the angular brackets, and they can allow you to move from one part of the web page to another part part of another web page. And once you write the HTML documents, they're easily written in the notepad. That means any other text editor that you're having which has a file extension of .htm or .html. And HTML is not a case sensitive language. It's a very simple language to use which can do wonders, but then you have to work with the predefined tags. So on the contrary, we have another language, markup language, which is called as extensible markup language, which is more flexible when we talk about HTML, because when we talk about HTML, we are talking about predefined tags, but when we talk about XML, we are talking about the user defined tag. So first of all, it is platform independent. HTML actually talks about the beautification of the data, but when we talk about the XML, it talks about the description of the data. So HTML deals with how the data should look, but XML describes the data itself. Okay, so you have to remember that with XML you can specify how your document must appear, and at the same time the document where the tags that you're trying to use are user defined, so you don't have to. And secondly, it is a platform independent language where you can have the XML, programmer can use any kind of platform to have the information and the data irrespective of the software. And then we have HTTP, which is again one step lower to HTTPS, as I just told you about the concept of HTTPS in the previous slide. So I'm quickly running on this one, which says that it's a hypertext transfer protocol which allows you to view the web pages which are created using hypertext markup language on the World Wide Web. Okay, and these documents are created using HTML. And they are delivered using the protocol of HTTP again, but HTTP is not very safe. Nowadays we are using HTTPS, and we provide the address of the document to view the pages which are made in using HTML. So apart from that, there are other web services which are we are using. So what is a domain name? When I am giving a name, a unique name to my website, that's actually a domain name. So if I'm saying csbhasha.com, so that will be my domain name. It's google.co.in, yahoo.com. They are the names which are given to the websites. That's basically a domain name. And the domain name has actually two important parts: a name, along with that it also has an extension which tells which type of website it is. So if you have an educational website, you will use the extension .edu. You have a commercial website, you will use .com. You will have a government website, you will going to use .gov. If it's a military website, you will use MIL. So depending upon that, and there are certain rules that you're supposed to remember while giving a domain name, where a name cannot have a letter, and secondly, a domain name allows you to have a special character which is hyphen, and the name should not be that big, which is more than like 64 letters, so that you will, otherwise you will not be it will not going to accept it. Now, what is a URL? Uniform Resource Locator. When you're going to a domain name, and inside that name, when you're going to a specific page, say for example, you're going to google.co.in, you're going to sign in. When you click on sign in, you just have a look at the the address bar. You will see that it takes you to a specific page, and that specific page of a website is its URL, Uniform Resource Locator. Again, it also has these specific parts. The first part tells you about the protocol, that is HTTP or HTTPS or FTP or Telnet, and the second part tells you about the complete address, and then it tells you further, it takes you to a specific page. Okay, so what is a website? A collection of web pages is basically a website, and the first page of your website is actually called as a home page. And to access the website, you just have to type in the domain name, followed by the extension and all. If you want to go to a specific URL, you can always specify that. And examples, as you know, like Google or Hotmail or Yahoo or Mac, I mean Apple and all. So these are all websites. Now, where do you view these websites? You view these URLs or domain names of the websites on a specific software, application software, which is called as a web browser. And the information on the internet is nothing but the collection of the documents of all the world linked together by a computer network. And that data which is on the internet can actually be seen on this application browser. And some of the examples of the application software like web browser is Google Chrome or Firefox, Safari, like if you're using Mac and all. So what are the other web services apart from that? We have something called as web servers, web hosting, and web scripting also. Now, what is a web server? Again, it's also a program. Of course, it's a server has. If a computer has a specific program which allows you to take the request from another computer for a web page to be shown and then delivers the request accordingly, that's called as a web server. So a request comes into the web server where the client computer, like if I have to view a particular page on google.co.in, then my system will be acting like a client and my client will initiate a request. That request goes to the server of Google, and whatever specific page I would like to see, that page has to be accessed using my server, and that's what I actually see, and it responds. So a web server program accepts HTTP or HTTPS request from the client computer, and it gives response according to that. Now that response is actually given in the form of a web page, where the web page is created using HTML or hypertext markup languages. So while handling the client request, if there is some error which is found on the web server, then that error is also sent. So sometimes at the time of maintenance and all, you must have noticed that the sites or the servers, they send you information that the maintenance is going on and you're not able to see the request. Now, what is web hosting? You must have seen that if I'm creating a website, how do they show, or how do they where are all the files and all the data, and who is actually responsible for showing or getting that space for you on the network? And that's basically called as your web hosting, which is a service which allows the organization or an individual to post a website. So first of all, I'm supposed to purchase it. Nowadays it's not very expensive, you just have to have a minimum I mean, with companies like Big Rock and all, you can actually have uh, very nominal charges of approximately 3,000 to have your own domain name, and it even does the hosting also, where you take the domain name once the name is there, because the responsibility to choose for a domain name, it has to make sure that this with the same name there is no other website which is actually existing. And then they do the hosting, because here the websites are hosted, or they are stored on the special computers called as servers. And when the internet users want to view your website, they need to type the address. So they when the website hosting is actually having, they contain the server, so that at the time of rush, like if 10,000 people at the same time are trying to access a particular website, you must have seen that the website suddenly crashes, because if they're not having very powerful servers, and in that case the site can crash. So you require um, companies so that they provide you the proper servers, and they do the maintenance of those servers also. And finally, we have web scripting. So it's again a programming language. It allows you to react to a particular thing. Like when you're typing a username on inside a text box, what should happen? When you're clicking on a particular button, what should happen? Whether when in place of age you're trying to type your name, what should happen? So when your system has to respond on the basis of the data that is taken on the web page, that is handled, or that concept or that programming language which is handling that is called as web scripting. So web scripting is basically a language which allows your web page to react on the basis of the input that a particular page is giving, and on the basis of that there are two types of web scripting. So first of all, let me just tell you again, I'm repeating it again. What is web scripting? They are created using not just you first of all you create your web page using a hypertext markup language. Now to interact with that page which is created using hypertext markup language, you use certain languages like VBScript and JavaScript and PHP and all, which can interact when the user types in the data. Okay, so that is done, and that concept is basically, or that programming language is which is handling the input, is called as web scripting, and it is done on client side, it is also done on server side. These are the examples of web scripting languages which are done on client side, that is VBScript, JavaScript, PHP. And when it's done on the server side, it is ASP, JSP and PHP. Now what exactly is happening? I'll give you a very simple example of web scripting. Suppose you are registering for a particular competition, okay, and you have received a link. Now when you type your name and by mistake you've entered, in place of your name you've entered a number, so your system will going to immediately respond saying that the input that you've entered in the text box is incorrect. So that scripting which is handling it is basically called as a client side scripting, because here the scripts are executed on the local computer after you've loaded the web page, depending upon the input that you're giving. Okay, now once you have entered all the data correctly, you click on the submit button and your data goes into the database. So how the data should be stored into the database and the connectivity is there, where that concept is actually called as your server side scripting. So it's basically what happens actually at the back end is your server side. So using PHP you can store or take the data that you have taken after validating it from the given requirements at the client side. It goes into the database and there the data gets stored, and that is nothing but your server side scripting. And these are the examples. So the scripting process for the server side is done on the remote computer, and hence the response is comparatively slower than the client side, because client side scripting is done right on the machine, on a specific machine, while for so if there are 500 people who are filling the registration form at the same time, they will receive the individual responses on their system when they are trying to enter the data, okay, whether the data is correct or the field is left blank and all that. But once the data is submitted and it goes into the server, that takes little time. What is Web 2.0 for social networking? Now, see, we started with Web 1.0, where it was just talking about the data in terms of, the textual messages. But then came a world where the revolution, it was then in the field of computers, where websites were created, they were shared, the information was shared, the data was not only just created, but the textual representation was apart from the textual representation, there was graphical representation also, there were video sharing also. So this is nothing but Web 2.2. So that revolution, where you're not only just restricting yourself to create, but at the same time to collaborate and share and work with a lot of people together. Like for example, when you're working with Google Docs, you are not only sharing the information, you're working simultaneously together with each other. That is called as your concept of Web 2.0. So it enables the people to take interactive part in a particular website, and they can add all kinds of content, which includes video, audio, chat, blogging and instant. So how Web 2.0 is very much linked with social networking, because what do we do in social networking? We form a group of individual depending upon our areas of interest. So whether it's Facebook or it's Twitter or it's LinkedIn, we are join together on the social networking sites, and it enables user not only to interact but also to share and change the you can say the resources dynamically in the electronic medium. So using Web 2.2 environment, it is possible to put a document up into the web, and using a web-based web processor, a word processor, all your colleagues can make changes. So as I just gave you the example of Google Docs, where you are working simultaneously. Similarly, whether it's Facebook, you form a group where you are sharing the information, you are sharing your pictures, when you're on LinkedIn, you're sharing your professional credentials. So it's very much related to Web 2.0, because it is allowing this computer, this revolution in the computer has actually allowed you to not just share or communicate in a very simple way, but to at the same time collaborate with each other. And now the last topic is, we do of course online transactions also, and when we do online transactions on the computer, that's actually called as e-commerce. So it's basically the business in the online environment where the transaction is done either using your mobile, or it is done using your computer, or it is done using the other apps nowadays that we're having, other apps also specifically for it, like Paytm and Google Pay and all. Okay, so we have to remember that e-commerce is the online business between two parties where the transaction is done, of course, under mutual acceptable condition. And secondly, the transaction depends upon the trust, because we are, of course, we have given our consent when we are on Amazon. We have given the consent that, yeah, I would like to buy from you, and they are asking for my bank credentials, and they say that, okay, now you pay the money. When I'm paying the money again, whether through Paytm or through net banking and all, I am giving my credentials. So there is a mutual understanding between the two parties that neither they will going to misuse my information, nor I will going to in any way misuse the data. It's okay. So there are different ways of doing e-commerce, and the first way is of course online banking, where a user is doing the financial transaction using the internet, or the net banking is what you can say, where the customer can access his account and conduct many transactions. Mobile nowadays, of course, in place of system, when we are using mobile or a PC, and we are using apps. So if one of the very common apps which is associated with SBI is YONO app that you can use. Okay, so you can pay your bills, and you can do a lot of other things and transfer the funds and all using the mobile app. And last but not the least, of course, is the apps nowadays which are linking to your, which are linked actually by your consent to your bank details, and they keep on reminding you that now it's a time to give the electricity bill, or it's time to give your mobile bill and all that. Like for example, it's Google Pay or it's Paytm. So they will actually these services, they allow you to do this kind of transaction. So all these are basically part of e-commerce. So I hope, children, I was able to clear some of the doubts in terms of the last part of networking. In case you still have any kind of doubt in a specific area, you please do write under the comment section, and just go through all the parts for your board examination. And it's something which is very comfortably, you don't have to go into too much of detail of all these things. Just the terminology concept should be clear to you, and if it's clear, you will be able to do any kind of questions. So don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and have a lovely day.